Jon Moxley retains the AEW World Championship, Daniel Garcia wins the TNT Championship, and the Costco guys are super over. I'm Luke Owen and this is my review of AEW Full Gear 2024 in about as long as this video takes.
Support WrestleTalk!
Before we get into the full gear review, one of the things I didn't really get to cover in yesterday's WrestleTalk news was the change to the women's WarGames match. CM Punk was announced as the 5th guy for the OG Bloodline against Bloodline 2.0 in the men's match, but the babyface side of the women's match seemed to lose someone when Jade Cargill was revealed as being attacked backstage. WWE taped next week's SmackDown, which revealed her replacement, so if you want to avoid that, skip ahead about 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1, it's CM Punk. JK, it's Bayley. Fightful Select are reporting that it was intimated to Fightful that the Jade Cargill angle was to cover a legitimate injury. This isn't confirmed though, as Sean Rossap adds that he's working on confirming this news. Now let's get into AEW. The pre-show opened with Deonna Purrazzo taking on Anna Jay in only the second women's match on the card, and according to Sean Rossap on the post-show Fightful review, this was a match that Purrazzo had to fight to get added. She hasn't wrestled in a few months, reportedly is not injured, she's just not booked. And then she lost here in her hometown. That'll teach you for trying to get more women on the show. Buddy Matthews won a very fun four-way with Commander, Beast Mortis, and Dante Martin, and was the most over of the four, despite Beast Mortis being there. But the real highlight of the pre-show was the Costco's Guys match, as Big Boom AJ beat QT Marshall with the Rizzler and Big Justice at ringside. This was a perfect celebrity match, even though AJ is a former wrestler, and was in the end one of the most over things on the show. Anecdote is not evidence, but someone did tell me on social media over the weekend that they have not watched AEW since they aired the Punk footage, but did plan to check out the pre-show to see the Costco guys. Tony Khan on the post-show media scrum said that his own friends who don't watch wrestling said they would actually check out AEW to see this match. It'll be interesting to see if this does create late pay-per-view buys. Credit to all the guys in the match as well, particularly QT, who pushed for this match to happen, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. The main show kicked off with what I thought was going to be the party match opener, where everyone just does big moves to pop the crowd, as Private Party defended their tag titles against the Outrunners, Kings of the Black Throne, and the Acclaimed, but it was more about the latter team's breakup angle, which is getting to A-Town Down Under levels of just break up already. They did the wacky spot where both of them are the legal man, so they tried to pin each other, which was dumb when the New Age Outlaws did it 25 years ago and did not age well when New Day tried to do it nearly a decade ago. Private Party won after more miscommunications between Bowens and Caster, and it was about the second move that they did in the match as they spent the rest of it bumping around for everyone else's moves. This was an odd match and not the best use of all of these teams. MJF beat Roderick Strong in a very good match that did not have a huge amount of heat. MJF targeted Roddy's hands and fingers, which led to the finish where he tapped out to the Salt of the Earth armbar very quickly. MJF got a chair and Pillmanized Roddy's hand, and only then did Adam Cole and the Kingdom run down for the save. Kyle O'Reilly also came out and shoved down Cole, blaming him for what happened to Roddy. Mercedes Moné hasn't had the best reception in her AEW run, going by the comments here on this channel and on the WrestleTalk podcast, with some arguing she's been a bit of a bust. But tell that to this match with Chris Statlander, which was absolutely awesome. Monet tried every trick she had against the power of Stat, but Chris kept on getting up, kept getting back in the ring, and kept kicking out. But Monet was no slouch either, as she also survived Stat's power offense, including kicking out of a superb F5 reversal when she caught Monet from the frog splash. The finish was great too, as Statlander hoisted her up like she did on Dynamite, but this time Monet was able to reverse and throat Chris into the ropes, rolling her up for the retention. Really, really good match, but one that does highlight why this Camille storyline just isn't clicking, as Monet won clean here. Again, therefore not really requiring a heater at ringside. Also awesome was Hangman Page versus Jay White, who had one of my favorite opening matches of the year at last month's WrestleDream, and this was a great follow-up that played off a lot of what happened in that match. Just as Jay did to Hangman at WrestleDream, Page went after White's knee throughout this match, at one point even putting his boot between the guardrail and booting it, then putting on his own ankle lock. Jay went after Hangman's knee again, but in the end, it was his wrestling acumen that got him the win, as he managed to counter Hangman's counter of the Blade Runner into another Blade Runner from out of nowhere. This was so great, but surprisingly, will not be the last we see of these two on this here show. In easily my most anticipated match of the night, Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay had an absolutely storming match that was every bit as great as the smart people in the room expected it to be. Fletcher was vicious with Will, going after his shoulder and ripping off the medical tape, culminating to a gnarly leaping tombstone off the apron onto the steel steps. Let me tell you, when these lads get going, there's nothing quite like it, and the crowd reactions reflect that. Look, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but you cannot deny that what they do gets over, and their sequences of counters and reversals got this crowd on their feet. But that tombstone ended up being the difference maker, as Will tried to hit the hidden blade, but all the damage to the arm meant that it was ineffective. Either that or Fletcher is a hidden blade type Pokemon, as he just seemed to absorb the blow and it made him stronger, hitting the top rope brainbuster for a clean win. I said on the Full Gear predictions video that Will would go out of his way to put Fletcher over here, and he did just that. Which brings me to you, Cody1390, who left a comment on our predictions video saying that they were always planning on backing us over on Patreon, smart guy, but thought that Tempest and I were high for thinking that Fletcher would win, laying down the offer that if Kyle won here at Full Gear, he would support us on Patreon for 2 straight months. So thank you, Cody1390. I look forward to seeing your name in the comments on our Patreon posts with great interest. Mina Shirakawa came out for Mariah May's champagne celebration and put her over as the love of her life, but May seemingly can't let people get too close to her as she went to crack the champagne bottle over Mina's head, but Shirakawa ducked and booted it out of her hand. She speared her off the stage through some tables, kissing her with a bloody mouth, just as May had done to Toni Storm. A good TV angle that didn't really need to be here on pay-per-view. Daniel Garcia won the TNT Championship from Jack Perry in a good match and got a very nice emotional video package for his entrance, featuring home video footage of his childhood and a phone call from his mum. Very, very sweet. But the sweetest thing for me was Daddy Magic, after Garcia won, shouting that it's been just 1 year since Danny's losing streak in the C2, and this victory is a testament to how hard he has worked to overcome those losses. A great advert for the upcoming C2, which starts this Wednesday on Dynamite. And Fightful Select are reporting that along with Okada, we will see Will Ospreay, Ricochet, Kyle Fletcher, Darby Allin, Shelton Benjamin, and Claudio Castagnoli in this year's tournament. The full list will be released later today. Speaking of Konosuke Takeshita and Ricochet, they had a very good match for the International Championship, which Takeshita won clean with a top rope Falcon Arrow. I appreciated all the clean finishes on this show and the restraint from using big blood, as that was all safe for the main event, and therefore it meant more. Now, maybe it's just because I've got TNA on the brain at the moment because of that big near 1 hour video on the company's history that went live yesterday, or because Ollie and I have been reviewing these shows over on our Patreon, which Cody1390 will be enjoying soon, but there was something about Bobby Lashley and Swerve Strickland that made me think of the first match between Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe at Genesis 2006. The arguments on the wrestling forums at the time were that it made sense for Angle to win, as it was his pay-per-view debut and he was the big star from the big company that had chosen the number 2 promotion. But Samoa Joe would get so much more from beating that guy, and it would ultimately mean more. The same can sort of be said for Bobby and Swerve. Sure, we want to put over the Hurt Syndicate and the power of Bobby Lashley, so it does make sense to put him over on his pay-per-view debut, but former world champion Swerve Strickland could have gained so much by beating him in that pay-per-view debut. But I could be wrong, as Bobby did win here and Swerve looked awesome coming out of it. So maybe everyone's a winner. Swerve had Bobby on the ropes after a Swerve stomp through the Spanish announce table, but a distraction in the form of MVP led to Lashley spearing Swerve through the barricade and putting on the Hurt Lock for the win. Hurt Syndicate also laid out Prince Nana after the match and stood tall. And the main event saw Jon Moxley take on Orange Cassidy, not only for the AEW World Championship, but also apparently the actual soul of all elite wrestling. Dude, this was not a wrestling match. This was a fight, and an awesome one at that. Moxley is such a good wrestler and brawler, and Cassidy is a perfect babyface. He was busted open early, which made his comeback, including the hands in the pockets, slow kicks, all the more great, because here is the magic of Orange Cassidy. At no point going into this match did I think that Orange Cassidy was winning, but like Sami Zayn at Elimination Chamber 2023, Cassidy made me believe he could. His near fall after cracking Mox in the head with the briefcase had me and this Full Gear crowd on their feet, totally buying it as a finish. Credit to Mox on that kick out as well. Here's a fun fact. If I write Death Riders in a YouTube description, it gets flagged as a potential word that could cause demonetization on a video. So we decided on the WrestleTalk podcast that we would rename this very cool group of baddies to the D-Riders. And I see there being no issue calling them that. So the D-Riders came out and the conglomeration brawled with them, and Willow freaking Nightingale made her return to AEW, taking out Marina Shafir. But sadly, it was not enough, as Mox hit a Death Rider for the win. And then came a very wacky post-match angle where Hangman Page ran down to face off with Jon Moxley, and Christian Cage laid out the champ with the Unprettier, and Page handed over the Money in the Bank contract, and then Jay White stopped Cage from cashing in. And as the D-Riders left, Darby Allin crashed his car into theirs and scared them off. Very, very wacky, and from what I've heard, this is not an official report as I've only heard it from one person, it will lead to a World's End main event of Jon Moxley, Adam Page, Jay White, and Christian Cage in a four-way for the world title. AEW pay-per-views always deliver, and Full Gear was no different, but it is also indicative of where AEW is right now, that this place was packed with over 10,000 fans that weren't hot for a lot of what was being put in front of them. It says a lot when the Costco guys were one of the most over things on the whole card. But there is also a lot to be excited about, especially as the C2 starts this week. And why not check out the TNA video that I talked about earlier, as I asked the question, who really killed TNA's momentum from about 15 years ago? Spoiler, it was not Scott D'Amore.